This is not...
It's not something going straight down. It's something moving.
Exactly. And it's not a model of a foot. It's a cast of the footprint.
Yeah.
And the footprint is a dynamic record of the entire step.
In October of 1967, a man rode into the forests of Northern California carrying a cheap 16-millimeter camera and an obsession that most people laughed at. What he brought back would become the most analyzed piece of mystery footage in modern history. For nearly 60 years, scientists, Hollywood effects artists, investigators, and skeptics all searched for the same thing hidden somewhere inside those grainy 59 seconds. A zipper, a seam, one tiny flaw proving the creature on film was just a man in a costume. But in early 2026, an advanced AI system scanned the footage frame by frame at a level no human eye had ever reached before. And what it failed to find has terrified people ever since. Because according to the analysis, there was no costume. There was never a seam at all. Long before the name Bigfoot existed, the forests of the Pacific Northwest already carried stories about something enormous moving through the trees. The Salish people called it Sasquatch. Other tribes had different names, different warnings, different legends, but the descriptions were always disturbingly similar. A massive figure, walking upright, covered in dark hair. Human, but not human. Hunters spoke of hearing heavy footsteps deep in valleys where no man lived. Families warned children not to wander into certain stretches of forest after sunset. And unlike mythical monsters told around campfires, these beings were described the same way people described wolves or bears, as real animals with real territory. Then the settlers arrived. And somehow, they started seeing it too. Throughout the 1800s, newspapers across the American Northwest printed bizarre reports from loggers, miners, and trappers claiming they had encountered giant ape-like creatures in remote wilderness regions. Most readers dismissed the stories immediately, until 1924. That year, a group of gold prospectors working near Mount St. Helens claimed their cabin had been attacked during the night by massive hairy figures that surrounded the structure and hurled rocks onto the roof for hours. The story spread so widely that the location earned a permanent name still known today, Ape Canyon. And unlike modern tabloids, these reports appeared in serious newspapers read by ordinary working Americans. Something was happening in those forests. Or at least, enough people believed something was. Then came Bluff Creek, late 1950s, Northern California. A logging road crew working deep inside Six Rivers National Forest discovered enormous footprints pressed into the mud near a creek bed. The tracks looked human, except no human should have been able to leave prints that size. A local newspaper columnist named Andrew Genzoli wrote about the discovery and casually used a new nickname for the unknown creature, Bigfoot. The name exploded across America almost overnight, and one man became completely consumed by it. His name was Roger Patterson. Patterson wasn't a scientist. He wasn't wealthy. And depending on who you asked, he was either a determined investigator or a dreamer chasing fantasy through the woods. But he believed something was hiding in the Pacific Northwest forests. He interviewed witnesses, studied footprint casts, collected stories from locals. In 1966, he even self-published a book arguing that an unknown primate species could exist in North America. Most people laughed at him. He kept searching anyway. Then, in October 1967, Patterson and his friend Bob Gimlin rode on horseback into the Bluff Creek wilderness, carrying a 16-millimeter Kodak camera. What happened next would divide the world for generations. The afternoon was silent. No wind, no birds. Just the sound of horses moving slowly along the sandy creek bed. Patterson and Gimlin had spent days searching the area after hearing reports of fresh tracks nearby, but they hadn't found anything convincing. At least not yet. Then both horses suddenly froze, ahead of them, near a pile of fallen logs beside the tree line. Something was standing there, massive, covered in dark reddish hair, and upright. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the figure turned slightly and began walking away. Not running, not panicking. Walking. Patterson's horse exploded beneath him. The animal reared violently, throwing him hard onto the rocky creek bed. The impact knocked the air from his lungs, but instead of retreating, he grabbed the camera. Bob Gimlin stayed mounted with a rifle in his hands, watching the creature through the sights, while Patterson sprinted forward trying to film before it disappeared into the forest. And somehow, he did. The footage lasted only 59 seconds, but every second felt impossible. The creature's stride looked smooth and heavy, not exaggerated like someone pretending to be larger than they were. Its arms swung naturally beside its body. The shoulders rotated with each step. Muscle seemed to shift beneath the hair as it walked across uneven ground. Then came the moment that changed everything. The creature turned its head. Just once, a calm glance over its shoulder toward the camera. Not aggressive, not frightened, almost indifferent, as if it had already decided the men behind it weren't dangerous. That single movement would become one of the most debated moments in documentary history. Because in that instant, the camera captured something nobody has ever been able to fully explain. When the film was developed, the reaction was immediate. Television networks replayed the footage across America. Newspapers printed still frames on front pages. Scientists argued, Hollywood argued. And almost overnight, the Patterson-Gimlin film became either the greatest wildlife discovery in history or the most convincing hoax ever created. There was no middle ground. Believers pointed to the way the creature moved. Nothing about the walk looked theatrical. Its weight shifted naturally across the creek bed. The hips and shoulders rotated in coordination. The arms swung with a rhythm impossible to fake without years of motion training. Even stranger, the hair didn't behave like a costume. Under magnification, parts of the fur appeared to ripple independently, as if muscles underneath were flexing beneath actual skin. And that terrified costume experts. Several professionals from the film industry admitted the footage showed details they could not recreate using technology available in 1967. But skeptics fired back just as hard. Roger Patterson had financial problems. He wanted fame. He had spent years obsessing over Bigfoot stories. And somehow, by pure coincidence, he just happened to be carrying a movie camera when a 7-foot creature walked out of the forest directly in front of him. To critics, the answer was obvious. It had to be staged. The debate eventually narrowed to one single image. Frame 352, the exact moment the creature looked back over its shoulder. Researchers nicknamed the figure Patty, and for decades, Frame 352 became the battlefield where both sides fought endlessly. Believers saw anatomy impossible to fake. Skeptics saw a man in a suit, and neither side could prove the other wrong. Years passed. Then decades. Technology improved. Digital enhancement arrived. Motion analysis evolved. Yet somehow the argument never died. Researchers tried recreating the footage using actors in ape suits. Every attempt failed. The proportions looked wrong. The walk felt exaggerated. The body lacked the same fluid weight seen in the original film. Even modern recreations using expensive Hollywood-quality costumes struggled to capture the realism of Patterson's footage. And that only deepened the mystery. Because if it was fake, how had two men in the middle of the wilderness created something that still looked more convincing than modern reproductions half a century later? Then came the confession. Or at least what should have been one. In 2002, author Greg Long published a book claiming the mystery had finally been solved. According to his investigation, a man named Bob Hieronymus admitted he had worn the Bigfoot suit for Patterson during the filming. For skeptics, this was the final nail in the coffin. Case closed, except the story immediately began falling apart. Hieronymus repeatedly changed details about the costume in different interviews. Sometimes it was made from foam, other times fur. Then different materials entirely. The alleged costume creator, Philip Morris, also contradicted himself multiple times when describing how the suit had supposedly been built. And there was one enormous problem neither man could solve. The suit itself was gone. No photographs, no preserved materials, nothing. Researchers attempted to rebuild the costume using their descriptions. Professional effects artists were hired. Modern replicas were filmed side by side against the Patterson footage. None matched. Not even close. The recreated suits looked stiff, artificial, heavy. The fur clumped unnaturally. The movement lacked the subtle muscle shifts visible in the original film. And perhaps most importantly, no reconstruction could explain frame 352. The face, the turn, the expression. Even decades later, the image still didn't feel like a man wearing a mask. Meanwhile, Bob Gimlin, the second witness who stood only feet away from the creature that afternoon, never changed his story. Not once. For nearly 60 years, he maintained the same account with almost frightening consistency. No dramatic rewrites, no sudden confessions, no attempt to profit from the mystery. Through documentaries, interviews, ridicule, and endless accusations, Gimlin continued repeating the same simple claim. What they saw at Bluff Creek was not a human being, and that created a problem no one could fully resolve. Because if the footage was fake, why did the hoax itself refuse to make sense? By the 2020s, the Patterson-Gimlin film had reached a strange place in modern culture. Too controversial for mainstream science, too convincing to disappear. A permanent deadlock. Then artificial intelligence entered the case. And everything changed. In early 2026, a high-resolution digital scan of the original film was fed into an advanced AI analysis system known as Grock. Unlike human investigators, the system had no emotional investment, no belief, no skepticism. It didn't care about Bigfoot stories, documentaries, or internet arguments. It was given one task only: determine whether the figure in the footage was a human wearing a costume. The AI began with biomechanics. It analyzed the gait frame by frame, searching for balance corrections common in humans pretending to walk like larger creatures. Normally, when a person exaggerates their stride or wears heavy padding, the body compensates automatically. The ankles adjust, the knees twitch, the hips overcorrect. Tiny involuntary movements appear because the human body struggles to maintain balance under unnatural conditions. The AI searched all 59 seconds for those patterns. It found none. Not one? Then came the second analysis: center of gravity. The creature moved across unstable sand without visible balance recovery, something the system calculated should have been nearly impossible for a human performer carrying extra weight. According to the AI, the body mass distribution didn't match normal human anatomy. The torso appeared too heavy, too stable, too naturally balanced. And still, the creature moved effortlessly. No strain, no instability, no evidence of someone struggling inside a costume. Then the AI measured limb proportions, and the results became even stranger. The arms were too long for a human, but too short for known great apes. The torso proportions failed to match chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, even reconstructed models of extinct giant primates. It didn't fit anything in the database. Not human, not ape, not bear, something else. And then the system moved to the detail that changed the entire investigation forever: the hair. At first, the fur looked ordinary, just dark shapes moving across grainy 1967 film. But when Grock isolated the surface patterns frame by frame, the system detected something no costume should have been capable of producing. The hair wasn't moving as a single layer. It was reacting in waves. Tiny ripples spread beneath the fur in perfect synchronization with the creature's muscles as it walked. Shoulders flexed, thighs tightened. Back muscles rolled beneath the coat with every step. The movement wasn't external. It was underneath the hair, like living tissue shifting below skin. For a moment, analysts believed the system had malfunctioned, because to reproduce that effect in 1967 would have required internal animatronics sophisticated enough to manipulate artificial fur in real time, while a performer walked naturally across rough terrain. That technology didn't exist. Not in Hollywood, not anywhere. At least not for another decade or two. The AI completed 4 separate tests: biomechanics, balance distribution, limb proportions, surface movement beneath the fur. Every result pointed in the same direction: away from a hoax, away from a costume, and towards something the system could not identify. But one final question still remained. Frame 352, the image that had haunted the argument for nearly 60 years. The moment the creature looked back, Grock zoomed in further than any previous analysis had attempted. Now the system wasn't studying movement anymore. It was hunting for something extremely specific: the edge. Every costume ever made has one. A transition point where fake material meets real skin. A seam near the jaw. A mask line around the cheeks. Latex separating from fabric beneath the neck. Under enough magnification, those flaws always appear. Always. The AI had been trained on thousands of examples from film effects, prosthetics, masks, and creature suits spanning decades of cinema history. It knew exactly what to search for. Pixel by pixel, the system scanned the face, the brow, the cheekbones, the jawline, the hairline near the skull, anywhere a disguise would have ended. And then something happened that nobody on the team expected. The seam never appeared. The transition from skin to hair looked completely continuous, natural, organic. There was no visible boundary separating a mask from a body because there was no visible boundary at all. The face blended into the fur the same way biology does on a real living animal. The AI reran the scan. Same result. Different lighting models were applied to test whether shadows had hidden a seam. Nothing changed. Again and again, the analysis returned the same conclusion. No edge, no break, no sign of fabrication anywhere in frame 352. And suddenly, after nearly 6 decades of arguments, the entire mystery shifted into something far more disturbing. Because disproving a costume is one thing, explaining what remains after the costume disappears is something else entirely. The final report delivered by Grock was short, cold, almost clinical. The footage is authentic and unmanipulated. The subject does not match known human biomechanics, documented great ape anatomy, or any recognized large mammal in the comparison database. No evidence of costume fabrication was detected. An unidentified biological organism, that was the classification. Not human, not bear, not ape, unknown, and maybe the most unsettling part of all, the footage itself never changed. The same 59 seconds people mocked for generations remained exactly as they had always been. It was the technology that changed. The camera recorded something in 1967 that humans still struggle to explain today. Something enormous walked out of the trees at Bluff Creek on October 20th, 1967. It crossed a silent creek bed, turned once toward the camera, and vanished back into the forest. For decades, the world searched desperately for the place where the illusion broke apart. The zipper, the mask line, the flaw proving it was only a man. But when the most advanced pattern recognition system ever pointed directly at the creature's face, it found nothing. No seam, no disguise, no indication that the thing staring back at the camera was pretending to be anything at all. And somewhere beyond the forests of the Pacific Northwest, whatever Patterson filmed that afternoon may still be walking there even now.